The old man collapsed against a frozen street lamp, looked like another forgotten soul in the blizzard. But hidden in his trembling hands was a leather portfolio carrying plans worth millions and the fate of thousands of lives. 17-year-old Tiana Reed was racing against the clock just minutes from the interview that could rescue her family from poverty. She should have kept running. Everyone else did. Suits and scarves rushed past, ignoring the man's pale lips and watery eyes. But something made her stop. She pulled her coat over his shoulders, whispering, "Sir, what's your name?" His voice cracked in the storm. Walter. Walter Hargrove. The name she almost didn't catch. The name she would later discover was tied to the very shelters that could save her own brother's life. In that instant, the choice she made would transform not only her destiny but an entire city's future. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel to watch the next stories by clicking the subscribe button right below this video. Thank you, amen. Snow pressed down on Minneapolis like a heavy hand, muting colors, swallowing sounds. Nicollet Mall, a downtown corridor lined with glass towers, banks, and coffee shops, had turned into a tunnel of white. The street lamps hummed, their halos distorted by wind-driven flakes. Cars crawled with headlights dimmed by fog, buses canceled their runs, and pedestrians hurried with their heads bowed, as if shame could protect them from the weather. It was Tuesday morning, just past 10 a.m., and the thermometer outside Wells Fargo blinked a defiant 10 degrees Fahrenheit before slipping down to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. Tiana Reed fought her way through the gusts with the determination of someone who didn't have the luxury to be late. 17, African-American, slim but wiry, she carried herself with the tension of ambition. Her warm brown skin was stung pink by the wind, her almond-shaped eyes dark and alert, constantly scanning her environment as though everything was a potential headline. A charcoal knit beanie struggled to hold down her curls, and an olive parka hung loose on her shoulders, patched at the elbow and fraying at the seams. Underneath, jeans and boots dusted with salt stains bore witness to winters past. She walked fast because her life demanded it. At 11:30 sharp, she had an interview with the Midwest Journalism Foundation, the only scholarship program she had a real shot at. Winning would mean tuition, housing, and a chance to escape the relentless grind of bills. Losing meant staying pinned under the same numbers she had been juggling for years, rent overdue by 3 days, Malik's medication running low, and her mother Sharon's exhaustion after 12-hour night shifts at Riverbend Senior Care. Sharon Reed, 42, African-American, was strong-shouldered from years of lifting patients but carried deep hollows beneath her eyes. Her dark brown hair, streaked with early gray, was usually tied back, her voice always steady for others, even when her knees trembled. She raised her children to believe that truth mattered more than comfort, and that kindness counted, even when no one noticed. Malik Reed, just 9, was small for his age. He had tight black curls, cropped short, and wide brown eyes that always seemed to be asking questions. Asthma made his chest whistle on cold nights, forcing him to sleep upright sometimes, his inhaler never out of reach. Despite that, he had a grin that lit up their cramped apartment and dreams of playing the trumpet, dreams Tiana promised she'd help him reach. Tiana reminded herself of them both with every step across the frozen street. The interview was her way out for all 3 of them. She pictured herself in that conference room, answering why she wanted to be an investigative journalist. Because she was tired of people ignoring the invisible. Because every day she saw lives dismissed, and she wanted to make them impossible to ignore. Her tote bag bounced against her hip, carrying her field recorder and a notebook. Tonight, no matter what happened with the scholarship, she planned to launch her own podcast, Snow Stories. Stories of the people winter tries hardest to erase. She'd written the tagline at 2 a.m. while Malik coughed himself back to sleep in the next room. Her phone buzzed. 10:07. 23 minutes to spare, if the storm didn't swallow the rest of her morning. Then she saw him. At first he was just another shape on the curb, a figure hunched against a black iron street lamp, half buried in the storm. But something about his stillness made her slow. He wore no hat, only a threadbare wool coat sagging with snow. His long legs sprawled at awkward angles, and in his veined hands he clutched a leather portfolio, hugging it as if it were more precious than his own body heat. His face emerged as she drew closer, pale, wrinkled, marked by age spots. His silver-gray hair was thinning, his jaw sagging, but his eyes, blue, watery, unfocused, still carried a spark of dignity. Yet his mouth twisted in a grimace, trembling with confusion. He looked like someone's grandfather, but abandoned by everyone who should have noticed. A security guard leaned in a nearby doorway, scrolling his phone. His badge read R. Daly, white, late 30s, broad-shouldered, his jaw square and red from the wind. He barely glanced up when Tiana paused. "Call 311, he muttered. "Non-emergency line. They'll deal with it." His tone was bored, rehearsed, like someone pointing to a trash can. Tiana frowned. 311? Daly shrugged. "Homeless guy. Been sitting a while. Not my job to touch it." "Not your job," she echoed under her breath. Her pulse ticked in her wrist. Every second wasted here risked her scholarship, her family's lifeline. But her mother's words rose like scripture. "Do what keeps your humanity intact, baby. You've got to live with yourself longer than you live with deadlines." She stepped off the sidewalk and into the storm's circle around him. The cold was harsher here, the snowflakes stinging her cheeks like pinpricks. She crouched, bringing her eyes level with his. "Sir?" she asked gently. "Are you okay?" It took him a moment to hear her. His lips moved first, shaping silence. Then sound arrived. "I'm supposed to be somewhere important." His voice was a baritone dulled by age, slow, hesitant. He touched his temple with trembling fingers, then let his hand fall in defeat. "But I can't remember how to get there." She bit her lip. He wasn't drunk, wasn't pretending. His confusion was real, and the cold had deepened it. "You'll freeze out here," she said softly. Without thinking twice, she tugged off her beanie and pulled it gently over his damp hair. Then she shrugged off her parka and draped it across his shoulders, ignoring the bite of cold on her arms. The old man flinched at first, then sighed as the warmth pressed in. His eyes glistened, not with snow this time, but something else. Gratitude. Her phone buzzed again. 10:13. The Foundation's office was still a 10-minute walk away, but the man in front of her was already slipping deeper into danger. She had to choose. "Let me call someone," she offered. "Do you have family?" He shook his head, more from fog than certainty. His hand patted the portfolio like it was his only compass. His lips trembled, then found words. "I have to sign something. Before everything closes." Her eyes dropped to the leather case. On its bottom corner, faint under scratches, she saw a monogram. WH. She brushed off snow with her glove, the initials shining through. Whoever he was, he hadn't been a nobody. "What's your name?" she asked. She wanted to anchor him, pull him back into himself. He blinked at her, searching her face as if it might contain the answer. Then, with a slow exhale, he said, "Walter Hargrove?" His voice cracked on the surname, uncertainty wrapped in memory. His grip on the portfolio tightened. I have to get somewhere before everything closes." The words trembled between them like a secret. And Tiana, 17 years old, late for the most important interview of her life, understood in that moment that her Tuesday was no longer hers alone. The coffee shop windows had fogged into watery mirrors, the kind where your own reflection looked like a stranger's secret. Tiana sat across from Walter Hargrove, her parka draped over his shoulders, his hands still trembling around the paper cup Jules had set there, the steam marking time more reliably than her buzzing phone. It was 10:28 a.m. now. The scholarship interview moved closer like a shark she couldn't ignore. Outside, snow piled against the curb in ridges, swallowing bus schedules whole, and the storm's voice on the glass sounded like a clock determined to run faster. Walter's condition hadn't improved much. His eyes fluttered between lucidity and fog, and when Jules stopped by to check again, he flinched from her well-meaning touch. "No hospitals," he muttered, the words louder now, as if rehearsed from years of stubborn defense. "They'll take everything. I know how it works." His voice held bitterness that didn't belong to just one morning in the snow, but perhaps decades of watching institutions consume people whole. A new voice broke into the fragile circle. "Miss, is this man bothering you?" The tone carried suspicion, and Tiana looked up to see a second security guard in the doorway. Not Daly this time, but someone built broader, thicker, with a face sharpened by certainty. His badge read S. Monroe. He was in his late 40s, white, heavy set under the fluorescent vest, with short salt and pepper hair cropped close to the skull. His eyes were small, gray, and mistrustful. His lips held the kind of permanent downturn born from years of assuming the worst. Monroe's hand hovered near his walkie-talkie like a parent about to confiscate toys. "You can't just drag random seniors in here," he said, stepping closer. "Looks like you're hassling him." "I should call this in." Walter shrank into his chair, shoulders folding inward, lips twitching as if to apologize for existing. Tiana rose halfway, palms out. "He's not bothering me." He needed help. He was sitting in the snow without a hat. "He's disoriented, maybe hypothermic. He needs warmth, not trouble." Monroe squinted, unconvinced, the suspicion in his eyes shifting toward her recorder sitting on the table like contraband. "That yours? What are you, some kind of blogger? Don't think you can make a show out of harassing old folks." His words carried the sting of ignorance disguised as authority. Before Tiana could argue, Jules stepped back into the fray. "She's helping him," Jules said firmly, her ponytail swaying like punctuation. "I saw it. If you want to call anyone, call city services, but don't hassle her. Not today." Jules's voice, sharp with tiredness and fairness, cut through Monroe's fog. The guard muttered something about paperwork and liability and retreated, but not without promising, "I'll be watching." The tension settled, but so did the urgency. Tiana's phone buzzed again, this time not her mother, but a notification banner from the Scholarship Foundation. Her breath hitched as she read, "Due to worsening storm, interviews moved up to 11 o'clock. Please arrive early if possible." She closed her eyes briefly, as if squeezing time might create more of it. She now had barely 30 minutes, a mile of snow between here and the Foundation's office, and an old man with history leaking from his lips. She turned her attention back to Walter. "Mr. Hargrove, what's in that portfolio?" "Maybe it will help remind you." He hesitated, clutching it tighter. His face shifted, kindness fogged by suspicion, but then he nodded faintly. His fingers, stiff with age and cold, fumbled at the clasp. The leather creaked open, and Tiana leaned closer. Inside were not random papers, but folded maps, blueprints on thick yellowed paper with hand-drawn notes. She recognized the crooked scrawl of someone who drew more than he wrote. Her eyes traced the diagrams, old warehouse outlines along the Mississippi River, annotated with circles and arrows. In red ink, one note repeated, "Winter Warmth Center, open before 5. On the corner of the top sheet, a faded stamp bled through. Hargrove Trust. Her heart stuttered. She knew the name. Not from school books, but from articles she'd skimmed for inspiration when dreaming about stories bigger than cafeteria fights and budget cuts. The Hargrove Trust had been a philanthropic foundation in Minneapolis for decades, credited with helping establish community centers and winter shelters. But she also remembered reading a headline last year, "Funding Frozen Amid Legal Disputes." She reached for her phone and typed, "Hargrove Trust Minneapolis News." The weak data connection crawled, but after a long spin of the wheel, words appeared. "Community shelters in limbo, pending trustee authorization. Key signature required from last living Hargrove member." Her gaze lifted slowly from the screen to Walter. "You're not homeless," she whispered, the realization hitting like heat. "You're Walter Hargrove. The Hargrove Trust is yours." His brows knit, eyes flickering between fog and fire. "They need me to sign," he murmured. "Ruth wanted—" The doors opened by Winter. The name Ruth slipped out like a talisman, a piece of his memory surfacing intact. "Who's Ruth?" Tiana asked gently. "My wife," he said, and his lips softened with reverence. "She hated Winter. Said no one should fight it alone. We promised the lights would stay on." His breathing turned shallow again, words trailing. Tiana fumbled for her recorder. She hadn't planned to use it this soon, but this was history speaking. She pressed record, the red light winking awake. "Mr. Hargrove," she said softly, "can you say your name for me, and what you were trying to do today?" He straightened slightly, as if muscle memory pulled him back to decades of boardrooms and ceremonies. "Walter Hargrove," he said clearly, the baritone steady for a beat. "And I was supposed to be at the trust, to sign the release. Without it, the shelters stay dark, people freeze. Ruth." His eyes blurred again, the clarity slipping, but the recorder had caught enough. Jules, listening from behind the counter, blinked in surprise, then whispered to herself, "That name. I've heard that name." She poured another coffee without being asked and brought it over, setting it beside Tiana like a silent endorsement. The cafe's door opened again, letting in a swirl of snow and a young man shaking off the storm. He was in his early 20s, black, tall, and lanky, wearing a battered college hoodie under an unzipped puffer jacket. His name tag from the bookstore across the street still clung to his chest. Derek. His eyes widened at the sight of Walter. "Yo, is that—" he started, but stopped when Jules shot him a look. Derek was known around Nicolette Mall as the friendly chatterbox who'd loan you his pen or help you find bus fare. His optimism had been hardened but not erased by years of working 2 jobs while chasing a degree part-time. He shuffled awkwardly to the counter, muttering to Jules, "Thought that man was dead. My grandma used to talk about him funding her block's rec center." Tiana's mind whirled. If Walter really was the trustee, then this wasn't just a man in need. It was a city's lifeline stranded in snow. The trust's shelters couldn't open without him. She checked her phone again. 10:42. Interview in 18 minutes. Her stomach knotted. She imagined the scholarship board staring at an empty chair, checking their watches, writing her name with a strike through it. But then she imagined warehouses along the river, their doors locked while people huddled outside in cardboard shelters. She pressed her lips together, caught in the vice of choices. Walter coughed violently, a harsh sound that made Jules instinctively grab napkins. "Hospital," Jules mouthed at Tiana, but Walter caught the word and shook his head fiercely. "No hospitals," he said, voice cracking. "They'll say I'm unfit. They'll take the trust. It has to be me." His eyes, watery but determined, found Tiana's. "Help me get there." Her phone buzzed again. A new message. "Interview check-in closes 10:55 due to storm." The choice sharpened into cruelty. She glanced at her recorder, at the map spread across the table, at Walter's trembling but resolute face. She thought of Malik's inhaler, Sharon's exhausted smile, the dream of journalism as her way out. And then she thought of Ruth, a name spoken with such devotion, and the note scrawled on the blueprints, "Open before 5. Before." She slid the recorder closer, pressed stop, and tucked it back into her tote. The interview would wait, or it wouldn't. But this story couldn't. "Okay, Mr. Hargrove," she said firmly. "We're going to figure this out." He exhaled with relief, clutching the portfolio as though it were oxygen. Outside, the snow thickened into a curtain, blurring the world into urgency and consequence. And inside, the clock above the counter ticked past 10:45. The storm did not lighten, it pressed harder, a white fist closing around downtown Minneapolis. Snow clung to every ledge and railing, swallowing signs until even familiar corners seemed strange. Inside the small cafe, the heater rattled like a tired drum, and condensation streaked the windows, blurring the outside world into ghost shapes. Tiana kept her eyes on Walter Hargrove, who sat bundled in her parka, the borrowed knit cap sliding down over his silver hair. He sipped at lukewarm coffee, his blue eyes sometimes sharp, sometimes fogged, drifting like he was walking through his own mind. Her phone buzzed again, 10:52. The scholarship office had warned her earlier, check in by 11 o'clock sharp or the opportunity was gone. Her stomach clenched. She had two futures in front of her and no map between them. Walter stirred, his hand twitching on the portfolio. "Stone Arch," he whispered suddenly, voice steadier than before. "The bridge, I promised Ruth." He glanced at Tiana, eyes clear for a second. "Do you know the Stone Arch Bridge?" "Yes," Tiana answered softly, leaning closer. She'd been there on school trips, the great stone span across the Mississippi, arches rising like ribs, a relic of industry turned into a walkway where tourists and couples took photos. She wondered what it had to do with him. "Ruth," he repeated. His mouth curved, sadness and devotion braided together. She hated winter nights. Said no one should be left in the cold. After she was gone, I dreamed of warehouses by the river, lit from the inside. Warmth for everyone. I called them houses of light. But Ruth, she called them simply the warm houses. His breath shook and the clarity slipped again, eyes glazing with the storm inside his skull. Tiana pressed record on her field device almost without thinking. The red light blinked quietly. She was torn, part journalist, part daughter. This story might be the key to saving hundreds, but every second she spent here meant her interview chair was emptying. Her phone rang. Mom. She stepped toward the hallway to hear. Sharon Reed's tired voice still carried authority, a kind of steel born of caregiving. "Baby, where are you?" "It's almost 11. "Mama," Tiana said, forcing calm. "I found an old man in the snow. He's not just anyone. He's Walter Hargrove." There was a pause. Her mother knew the name, the trust, the shelters. "Lord have mercy," Sharon whispered. "And he's out in this weather? He doesn't want a hospital. He just keeps saying he has to sign something before 5. If he doesn't, the shelters won't open. People will freeze tonight." On the other end, Sharon's breath was heavy. "Tiana, listen to me. Opportunity is something you make with your choices. But your dignity, your character is what you keep. Scholarships can wait. Integrity can't." Tiana closed her eyes. Her mother's words landed like a compass point. When she turned back, Jules was gently shaking Walter's shoulder. He was fading again, lips moving without sound. The storm outside howled louder. Tiana thought of Malik and his inhaler, of her mother on the bus at dawn, of all the invisible people in this city. She made her choice. "We're going to the Hargrove Trust office," she said firmly. "We'll prove who you are, get your papers in order. Then I'll make it to my interview." She added the last part for herself more than anyone else. They stepped outside. The world slapped them with snow that stung like needles. The sidewalks were half buried. Traffic moved in stutters, horns muffled under layers of white. Tiana tried dialing an ambulance, but the dispatcher said every unit was already on calls, heart attacks, car crashes, frostbite victims. Help was stretched thin. Walter stumbled, his long legs stiff, weight sagging heavy against her. Just as panic rose, a delivery truck pulled up to the curb, brakes squealing. The driver jumped out, a man in his mid-30s with the build of someone used to heavy lifting. He had sandy blonde hair under a battered cap, a stubbled jaw, and hazel eyes, sharp but kind. His jacket bore a faded logo, North Country Logistics. He spotted Tiana struggling to hold Walter upright. "You need help?" he called, voice rough but steady. Tiana hesitated. She was used to people passing by, not stepping in. "He's sick. We have to get to Hargrove Trust before 5. The man blinked, recognizing the name. "You're serious?" He pulled off his glove, offered a hand. "Name's Cole Ramsey. Used to be a firefighter before my back gave out. Now I drive boxes. Hop in. I can get you closer than your feet can." Cole's face carried its own history. His cheekbone was slightly crooked, a leftover from a fall years ago. His eyes held a quiet vigilance, the look of someone who had seen lives unravel fast and still chose to believe in stepping forward. Rumor in the neighborhood said he'd left the fire department after pulling a child out of a blaze only to lose his best friend in the same collapse. Since then, he'd thrown himself into small acts of rescue whenever fate allowed. With Cole's help, they lifted Walter into the cab. Snow blew in around them, coating the dashboard before the heater could fight it back. Tiana climbed in beside him, shivering, her boots dripping slush onto the rubber mats. Cole slammed the door, shifted gears, and the truck rumbled forward into streets that barely looked passable. As they drove, Tiana kept her recorder balanced on her knee. "Mr. Hargrove," she said gently, "tell me about Ruth." About the warm houses. His eyes flickered open, cloudy but alive. "Ruth was light," he said softly. "She ran the library on East Lake. Always a book in her hand, even when her fingers froze. She said stories kept people warm when blankets failed. After she died one winter, flu, cold, I couldn't stand the thought of anyone else alone in the dark. So I made plans. Warehouses by the river turned into shelters. A place where no child shivered. Ruth's dream, not mine." His voice faltered, but the recorder caught each word. Cole glanced at Tiana, his hands gripping the wheel. "If that's true, you're carrying the city's lifeline," he muttered. "Best keep him alive till you get there." The truck swayed as wind shoved it sideways. Snowplows ahead had stalled, lights blinking like dying stars. Cole cursed under his breath, then turned down a narrower street lined with brick warehouses, the river's roar faint beneath the storm. Tiana squeezed Walter's hand. He squeezed back, faint but deliberate. She pressed stop on her recorder, heart hammering. Every second mattered for the shelters, for her interview, for her family's fragile future. And now 3 lives moved together in one truck through a city that seemed determined to bury them. The delivery truck skidded slightly on the snow-packed street as Cole Ramsey downshifted and pulled into the narrow lot beside a limestone front building that loomed against the storm like a stubborn relic. The brass plaque on its doors read Hargrove Trust, half-frosted but still commanding. Tiana felt her chest tighten, part relief, part fear. The clock on Cole's dash glowed 10:46. Cole killed the engine. "This is as close as I can get you. Roads further downtown are jammed." His hazel eyes scanned Walter slumping in the passenger seat. "You're gonna need help inside." Tiana nodded, shaking snow from her curls. She tugged Walter's arm gently. "Mr. Hargrove, we're here." His blue eyes fluttered open, confused but flickering with recognition at the name above the doors. Together, she and Cole half-carried him inside. The lobby was warm but hushed, the kind of silence that spoke of polished wood and old money. Dark green carpet muffled their steps, and a chandelier hung above like a reminder of wealth's permanence. Behind a walnut desk sat Eleanor Marsh, the trust's receptionist. She was in her mid-50s, tall and thin with perfectly straight posture, her blonde hair lacquered into a helmet bob. Her rimless glasses perched low on her nose, and her lips pressed into a permanent line of skepticism. Years of guarding the gates of power had hardened her, and she wielded bureaucracy like a shield. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of Walter, bundled in an oversized parka, hair matted, cheeks raw from cold. "Excuse me," she said crisply. "Can I help you?" Tiana steadied her voice. "Yes, this is Walter Hargrove. He needs to meet the board right away. There's urgent business with the shelters." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Cole, then back to Walter, then finally to Tiana, who looked far too young and too wet for this marble space. "Mr. Hargrove has been retired from active matters for years," she said slowly, "and we can't admit anyone without legal guardianship or medical clearance. I'll need identification, a physician's note, and authorization from the board." Her words landed like locked doors. Walter stirred, trying to rise taller. "This is my building," he croaked, but his voice trembled. lost under the weight of her skepticism. Before Tiana could answer, heavy doors opened, and a group spilled into the lobby, two assistants carrying tablets, and behind them Gregory Lang, one of the trust's senior attorneys. Lang was in his early 50s, medium build, his dark hair slicked back with precision. His tailored navy suit seemed cut to make everyone else look underdressed. He had the smooth confidence of someone who won arguments before anyone else spoke. Lang's reputation preceded him. Brilliant strategist, but ruthless in redirecting philanthropic funds toward more profitable ventures that kept donors happy. His sharp brown eyes scanned the scene, lingering with faint disdain on Tiana's wet boots and Cole's reflective jacket. Then he looked at Walter. For half a second, surprise flickered, then calculation. Well, well. Mr. Hargrove, Lang said smoothly, we weren't expecting you. He turned to Eleanor. Get the boardroom ready. As they guided Walter into the long, oak-paneled meeting room, Tiana's phone buzzed again, this time with a sharp ringtone she had set for emergencies. Midwest Journalism Foundation incoming video call. She swallowed hard. She answered with shaking hands. On screen, the familiar logo appeared, then the face of Marjorie Klein, the scholarship director. Marjorie was in her 60s, a woman with angular features softened by laugh lines. She wore her gray hair in a chignon, pearls at her neck, glasses perched on her head. Her voice was kind but clipped years of balancing compassion with deadlines. Tiana, she said, the storm has forced us to move things online. If you're not logged in by 11 o'clock, I'm afraid we'll have to proceed without you. The clock above the boardroom door read 10:48. Less than 12 minutes. Tiana's heart pounded. She looked at Walter, shaky in his chair at the end of the long table, portfolio clutched like a lifeline. The board members filtered in, older men and women in suits, whispers rustling like paper. Lang took a seat beside Walter, his smile polite but predatory. Walter blinked around the room, disoriented. "Where's Ruth?" he muttered. "She should be here." One of the board members, Sarah Whitmore, leaned forward gently. Sarah was in her early 40s, tall and slender, with auburn hair tied neatly in a bun. She had soft green eyes that tried to read hearts before contracts. She'd grown up the daughter of a factory worker and often clashed with Lang over the trust's direction. "Mr. Hargrove," she said kindly, "Ruth isn't here, but we are. We just need to understand your wishes," Lang cut in smoothly, voice oiled. "With all due respect, Sarah, Mr. Hargrove's health appears compromised. This is precisely why we've proposed reallocating unused shelter funds toward the River Point office complex. Profitable, sustainable. The city benefits." Tiana's hands curled into fists. She glanced at her phone, 10:52. Marjorie's face was still frozen on the screen, waiting for her to confirm attendance. Walter's fingers fumbled the clasp on his portfolio. Papers spilled across the polished table maps of riverfront warehouses, notes scribbled in red. "The warm houses," he whispered. "For Ruth. For the city. Before it all closes." His eyes searched, desperate, as if someone would steal the thought from his lips. Lang slid the papers neatly back toward Walter with a cold smile. "We all want what's best," he said, his tone implying otherwise. Tiana felt her pulse in her throat. If she left now, Walter would be outmaneuvered, his vision buried under corporate ambition. If she stayed, her scholarship, the chance for her family, was gone. Her mother's words echoed again. "Opportunity is something you create. Character is what you keep." The boardroom held its breath. Outside, the storm raged against the windows, and inside, the clock struck 10:53. The storm had not relented. If anything, the white curtain outside the tall windows of the Hargrove Trust boardroom thickened, swallowing Minneapolis in silence and sirens. The chandelier above the long oak table glowed with a golden steadiness that contrasted sharply with the tension beneath it. Walter Hargrove sat hunched at the head of the table, wrapped in Tiana's patched parka, silver hair escaping from her beanie. His blue eyes were watery but restless, his lips moving in fits and starts as though chasing memories before they slipped. Tiana clutched her phone in one hand and her recorder in the other. Her scholarship call had blinked away a few minutes ago, 11 missed, opportunity gone, but something else had happened in its place. She hadn't realized she'd left her recorder synced to her small podcast channel, and when she had pressed record during Walter's fragmented testimony, her device had uploaded live. Now her phone buzzed not with foundation deadlines but with notifications, retweets, shares, comments. Her podcast, Snow Stories, suddenly had listeners, thousands of them, voices rising in the storm. Cole Ramsey leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, his sandy blonde hair damp from melted snow. He was silent, but his hazel eyes scanned every corner, always the ex-firefighter, alert for sparks. Sarah Whitmore, auburn hair pulled tight, green eyes alight with concern, sat 2 seats down from Walter, taking notes as though she were recording scripture. At the far end, Gregory Lang, the polished lawyer with ambition sharper than his tie, smirked into his phone, thumb scrolling like a man planning victory. Then Eleanor, the stiff receptionist with her lacquered bob, burst back into the room, breaking protocol. She held her own phone high, disbelief painted across her usually stone features. "It's on the news," she announced. Local station picked it up. "Hargrove Trust founder speaks during storm. Warm houses promise to open tonight. It's everywhere." She glanced at Tiana, suspicion melting into reluctant awe. Walter blinked, confused. "News? Already?" Tiana's throat tightened. She hadn't meant for it to spread like this, but the storm outside seemed to carry the words faster than trucks could plow. Her phone chimed again, number sign warm houses trending locally. A photo already circulated. Someone at the cafe earlier must have snapped it, of her kneeling beside Walter, wrapping him in her coat. The caption read, "Teen protects old man in storm. Turns out he's Minneapolis's forgotten architect." The board murmured, uneasy. Lang straightened in his chair. "Publicity doesn't change procedure. The trust requires legal guardianship to—" "Procedure won't matter if people freeze tonight," Sarah cut in, her soft voice edged with steel. She tapped her notes. "And thanks to this young woman, the public is watching. Ignore Mr. Hargrove's wishes now and you'll have a riot of angry citizens at our gates by sunset." Cole pushed off the wall. "She's right," he said, voice gravelly but calm. "I know because I was one of them. After I left the fire department, I hit bottom. One winter, after discharge, no job, no roof, I slept in my truck until it broke down. The only place I didn't freeze was a warehouse they'd opened as a warm house. I owe my life to that. If you shut those lights off now, you're not just shuffling funds, you're killing people." Every eye in the room swung to him. Cole didn't flinch, his broad frame squared like a man used to testifying before fire chiefs and coroners. Walter sat straighter suddenly, a spark of clarity igniting. "Yes," he said, voice stronger. "The houses. Ruth's dream. They were never mine alone. I designed them, but she gave them their soul." He placed a trembling hand on the portfolio. "We built arches and shelters, not to profit, to protect, to—" Sarah leaned forward, her green eyes soft. "Mr. Hargrove, you're saying you are the architect behind the program, not just the trustee?" Walter nodded slowly, memory filling in like sunlight through cracks. "Yes. Years ago, after Ruth passed, I stepped back. Anonymous. I couldn't bear the praise. But the plans, those are mine. Every beam, every heater placement. Ruth died in the cold. I swore no one else would." Lang's smirk faltered, but he rallied. "That's sentimental, not legal. Without a physician's clearance, any signature he provides—" A new sound cut him off, the low hum of notifications from half the board's devices. The local station had switched to live updates. On screen, a scrolling ticker. "City confirms. Hargrove Trust Funds released to open warm houses tonight." "How?" Lang demanded, eyes flashing. Tiana's phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. The face that appeared was Ellen Price, editor of the Star Tribune's Metro section. Ellen was in her late 50s, short gray curls framing a round face lined with laugh creases. She wore horn-rimmed glasses and spoke with the brisk warmth of a newsroom veteran who'd fought deadlines her entire life. "Young lady," Ellen said. "I just listened to your podcast feed." "You don't know me, but I've sat through 1,000 scholarship interviews. That recording you just put into the world? That's journalism. Raw, ethical, human. Who taught you to frame a story like that?" Tiana's throat went dry. "No one. Just, my mom says the invisible deserve witnesses." Ellen smiled faintly. "Well, your witnesses are listening. The scholarship committee's chair is in this building with me right now. I think you deserve another shot." Tiana's knees nearly buckled. She whispered, "Really?" "Really?" Ellen said. "Finish helping Mr. Hargrove. Then call me back. We'll schedule your interview properly, not because you begged, but because you proved yourself where it mattered." Tiana ended the call, eyes stinging. Her phone chimed again, this time a message from Malik's number, though she knew her mother had typed it. "At Warm House number 3, lights on, Malik got free nebulizer. He's smiling. So proud of you." She swallowed hard. The storm outside felt different now, less like a prison, more like a messenger. Walter leaned back, fatigue tugging at his features, but his eyes brightened when he saw Tiana's expression. "See?" Ruth was right. One act of warmth spread. Sarah gathered the scattered papers, her hands steady. "Board members," she said firmly, "we have our directive. Mr. Hargrove's intent is clear, and the community is awake. We open the warm houses tonight." Lang slammed his folder shut, jaw tight. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his words felt smaller against the glow of the chandelier and the rising hum of phones buzzing with approval outside. Cole crossed his arms again, exhaling relief. "Guess the city found its fire." Tiana held Walter's hand gently, her recorder still on the table. Snow battered the windows, but inside the boardroom it felt like the first ember of spring had been lit. Morning bled into afternoon, and the storm still howled over Minneapolis. But inside the Hargrove Trust headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had begun as a tense boardroom standoff now felt like the start of a new season. Phones kept buzzing, messages kept coming in, and the words "warm houses" echoed across the city like a hymn in the snow. Walter Hargrove sat upright at the head of the table, his shoulders no longer sagging, his eyes clearer than anyone had seen in years. His silver hair, mussed beneath Tiana's knit cap, gave him the look of an old lion who'd found his roar again. Papers were neatly stacked in front of him, the red scrawls of his own hand glowing like proof of memory. Sarah Whitmore, auburn hair still tied in a severe bun, was smiling for the first time all day, relief softening the sharp edges of her features. Cole Ramsey, his reflective jacket unzipped, leaned near the window, arms folded, watching snowplows grind their way through the streets. Then the door opened again, and Eleanor Marsh, the receptionist with her lacquered blonde bob, stepped inside. But the tight disapproval she had worn earlier was gone. Her cheeks flushed pink, and in her hands was a folder. "The board has just concluded an emergency vote," she announced. "Effective immediately, the trust is establishing a new fellowship. Full scholarship, 4 years, investigative journalism at the University of Minnesota, stipend for equipment and housing, and an additional grant earmarked for community podcasting initiatives." She looked directly at Tiana, her skeptical eyes replaced by something almost warm. "It's to be called the Hargrove Ruth Fellowship." The words seemed to hang in the air, fragile and unreal. Tiana blinked, her breath catching. She'd missed her official scholarship interview. She had chosen Walter, chosen kindness, and yet here was an opportunity forged out of that very choice. "Are you saying—" she stammered. Walter's voice came steady, firm. "I'm saying you are not just a reporter, Tiana. You are the storyteller Ruth dreamed of. And stories are how cities remember who they are." Sarah slid the folder toward her. "Sign here to accept," she said softly. "It's not charity. It's recognition." Tiana's fingers trembled as she touched the pen, the weight of her mother's double shifts and Malik's fragile lungs pressing down. This fellowship wasn't just her future, it was survival. She signed her name, and it felt like carving her truth into stone. Walter wasn't done. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out a handwritten draft. His will, updated on the spot, witnessed by the board. In shaky script but with unwavering intent, he wrote, "Tiana Reed will serve as the storyteller of the trust, holding authority to oversee and publicly report on all funds allocated to warm houses." He looked around the table, daring anyone to object. If these houses are to live, they must stay transparent. Ruth would accept nothing less. Gregory Lang, the lawyer who had schemed to redirect funds, stiffened. His smooth composure cracked under the weight of the new arrangement. Sarah's voice cut through the room, cold as the storm outside. "Mr. Lang, given your conflict of interest and recent attempt to misappropriate trust funds, you are suspended pending audit. Compliance officers will begin review immediately." Lang's face drained of color. He gathered his papers wordlessly and left, the echo of his polished shoes fading down the corridor. Walter turned to Cole next. "You once found refuge in these shelters," he said. "Now I need someone who knows logistics, who knows what it means to protect people when the storm is at its worst. I want you to coordinate operations for the warm houses." Cole's hazel eyes widened. He had been drifting since the firehouse, since the night he'd lost a brother in arms in flames. His hands tightened into fists, then relaxed. "If you'll have me, sir," he said quietly, "I won't let the lights go out again." By late afternoon, as news cameras parked outside and volunteers rushed in, Minneapolis transformed. Across the riverfront, warehouses lit up, their yellow glow spilling onto snow like bonfires. Doors opened, cots unfolded, soup kitchens clattered to life. People streamed in from the cold families wrapped in thrift store coats, veterans with frostbitten hands, children whose laughter returned the instant they felt warmth. At Warm House number 3, Sharon Reed and young Malik arrived. Sharon had pulled her hair into a ponytail, her scrubs still beneath her winter coat. She signed up immediately at the volunteer desk, her tired eyes bright with pride. Malik, small frame wrapped in an oversized parka, clutched his inhaler nervously until a nurse handed him a brand new portable nebulizer, free of charge. His wide brown eyes lit up. "Mama, look. I can breathe easier now." Sharon bent to kiss his forehead, whispering, "Your sister did this." Back at the trust, the board adjourned, leaving only Tiana, Walter, Sarah, and Cole. The storm was finally beginning to ease, flakes slowing, sky lightening. Walter insisted on one more stop before the night ended. They bundled him carefully into Cole's truck and drove through streets carved open by plows until the arches of the Stone Arch Bridge rose ahead, spanning the frozen Mississippi like a hymn carved in stone. They walked slowly, Walter leaning on Cole's steady arm, Tiana at his side. On the middle span, where snow had drifted high against the railings, Walter stopped. From his pocket, he pulled a small brass plaque wrapped in cloth. With Cole's help, he fastened it to the railing. The inscription gleamed under a break in the clouds. "Ruth's Corner, where kindness finds its way." Walter's breath smoked in the cold, but his eyes glistened with warmth. "She would have liked this," he murmured. Tiana lifted her recorder one last time, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "There are days when opportunity doesn't look like a golden door," she said softly. "Sometimes it looks like an old man lost in the snow. And if you stop, if you listen, you might find that helping one person can warm an entire city." Cole stood behind her, the ex-firefighter turned shelter coordinator, snowflakes dusting his cap. Sarah lingered quietly, her tall frame silhouetted against the bridge lights, her green eyes reflecting pride. And Walter, shoulders no longer stooped, gazed at Ruth's plaque with a kind of peace no courtroom could have given him. Tiana ended the recording. The red light blinked off. Her podcast episode would go live before dawn. And when it did, Minneapolis would know not just about shelters or funds, but about a city's beating heart rediscovered in the middle of a storm. She had not chosen between her future and her humanity. She had turned her humanity into her future. Sometimes opportunity does not come dressed in success or gold doors. Sometimes it looks like a tired face in the snow, a voice asking for help, or a moment where you must choose between yourself and someone else. What Tiana learned is what we can all carry into everyday life. When you stop for kindness, you are not losing time. You are building a future, yours and someone else's. In our own lives, we pass people who may feel invisible. A neighbor carrying too many bags, a coworker sitting quietly at lunch, a stranger who just needs someone to notice. The question is, will we walk past or will we stop? If this story touched your heart, please share it with a friend who might need encouragement today. Leave a comment with your thoughts, and if you believe in the power of kindness and God's guidance, type Amen in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that doing the right thing still matters. May God bless you and keep you warm in every storm you face.